Arthur's family truth. I was crouching behind the overgrown shrubs outside my own front window, listening to my daughter and her husband plan how to drug me, have me declared mentally incompetent, and put me in a nursing home. And the worst part, I had just driven home from the notary's office with $2.8 million worth of news I was about to share with her. That's where this story starts. Not with the inheritance, not with Russell's death, with me, 64 years old, a retired judge, hiding in my own bushes, trying to keep my breathing quiet. My name is Gerald Sutton. I spent 27 years on the bench in Los Angeles County before I retired 2 years ago. I've seen things in that courtroom that most people would never believe, families tearing each other apart over money, kids turning on parents, husbands and wives who looked perfectly normal in public doing things to each other that would keep you up at night. I thought I was done with all that when I retired. I was wrong. My brother Russell passed away 3 weeks before any of this happened. Heart attack. He was 61 years old, living alone in Clearwater, Florida. We hadn't talked much in the last couple of years. Life gets in the way, and then silence just becomes easier than picking up the phone. I'm not proud of that. When his attorney tracked me down, I half expected it to be about funeral arrangements. It wasn't. Russell had left me everything. A beach house in Malibu valued at $1.9 million, a condo in Santa Monica worth around $900,000 total estate, $2 to $8 million. And tucked inside the legal documents, written in Russell's handwriting on a plain sheet of paper, was a note for the brother who always did the right thing. I sat in Carolyn Foster's office. She's the notary who handled the estate, and I just stared at those words for a long time. I'm not going to pretend I didn't get emotional. I did. Russell and I had let too many years go by without saying the things we should have said, and now he was gone, and this was the last thing he ever said to me. I pulled myself together, signed the papers, and walked back to my car. The drive home from Carolyn's office in Pasadena takes about 20 minutes. I had the window cracked. It was one of those warm California afternoons that makes you feel like things might actually be okay. I was thinking about my daughter Sandra and her husband Craig. They'd been living with me for 8 months. Their finances were a mess, bad investments, they said. And I never pushed for details because I figured that's not what a father does. You don't kick people when they're down. You just keep the fridge full and tell yourself it's temporary. Now I could actually help them. Set them up in the Santa Monica condo. Give them a real fresh start. I was rehearsing how I'd say it. Keep it simple. Don't make it a bigger deal than it needs to be. I turned onto my street and saw the house up ahead, blue shutters that needed painting, a lawn I kept putting off. I pulled up to the curb instead of the driveway, just out of habit or maybe something my gut noticed before my brain did. I don't know. The living room window was open in the middle of a hot afternoon, which we never did, and I could hear voices. Sandra and Craig, something in the tone stopped me. Not the words, I couldn't make them out yet, just the quality of it. Tight. Urgent. The way people sound when they're talking about something they don't want anyone to hear. I should have announced myself, should have just walked in, but I didn't. I moved quietly toward the window and crouched behind the shrubs along the front wall. The branches scratched my arms. My knees started complaining almost immediately. 64 years old, not exactly built for this anymore, but I held still. If Dad finds out about the debt, he'll kick us out. We can't let that happen. Sandra's voice, that familiar, anxious edge I'd been hearing more and more lately. He won't find out. We stick to the plan. Craig, flat, no emotion. Tomorrow you take him to that doctor I told you about. The guy will write whatever we need for $2,000 cash. Once we have the paperwork, we file for emergency guardianship. I gripped my car keys. The metal edge dug into my palm. What if Dad refuses to go? Then we put something in his coffee. A sedative, easy. Once he's in a facility, nobody listens to old people. His house, his assets, all of it under guardianship. A pause, and with what Russell left him, we're talking $2.8 million. They knew, somehow they already knew about the inheritance. They'd been listening to my calls, or going through my papers, or both. He's still my father, Sandra said, quiet. Like she was reminding herself of something she was trying to forget. He's an obstacle, Craig said. No hesitation, no shame. $2,000 for a doctor, maybe another $1,000 for the lawyer. Small price. Do you want those collectors showing up at the door? Silence? Long enough that I thought maybe one of them had moved toward the window. I didn't breathe. Then Sandra, no, you're right. We'll do it tomorrow. I backed away from the window. One slow step at a time. The lawn under my feet felt like it was tilting. I got back to my car, opened the door carefully, sat behind the wheel. I didn't start the engine for a while. I just sat there. I'd spent 27 years listening to people describe what other people had done to them: fraud, betrayal, cruelty dressed up in legal language. I'd always been able to stay detached. That's the job. You listen, you weigh, you decide. You don't let it hit you personally. This was hitting me personally. My daughter, the little girl I taught to ride a bike on the driveway of our old house in Arcadia, the one I walked down the aisle 6 years ago, she had just agreed, not very hard, but she'd agreed to drug me and hand me over to a stranger's institution so she and her husband could take my money. I sat there with that for a minute. Then something shifted. The part of my brain that spent nearly 3 decades on the bench took over. And it said, feelings later. Evidence now. I drove for about 6 blocks before I trusted myself to think clearly. There's a small park off Colorado Boulevard that I used to stop at sometimes after long days on the bench. Nothing fancy, a few oak trees, some benches, a patch of grass. I pulled in and sat there with the engine off. Here's what I knew. I had heard a conspiracy. My son-in-law had arranged for a corrupt psychiatrist to declare me mentally incompetent for $2,000 cash. My daughter had agreed to drug me to make sure I'd be compliant enough to get me there. The goal was emergency guardianship, full legal control over my finances, my property, my life. And the trigger was Russell's $8 million estate. Here's what I also knew. What I had right now was worth nothing in court. I'd heard a conversation through a window, no recording, no witnesses. Any halfway decent defense attorney would destroy it in 10 minutes. It was my word against theirs, and I was a retired old man living alone. I'd seen cases like this from the bench. The victim almost never wins on testimony alone. I needed evidence, hard evidence, the kind that doesn't leave room for arguments. I pulled out my phone and called Dennis Hartley. We'd worked across from each other for 15 years, him as a defense attorney, me on the bench. He was one of the sharpest people I'd ever worked with, and more importantly, I trusted him completely. He picked up on the second ring. Dennis, it's Gerald Sutton. I need your help. It's serious. Can I come to your office right now? He heard something in my voice. He didn't ask questions. Come straight up, he said. His office was on the 3rd floor of a building on Marengo Avenue. He met me at the door with his jacket off and sleeves rolled up, which meant he'd been working. I sat down across from his desk and told him everything. The notary visit, the drive home, the open window. Every word Craig had said, every word Sandra hadn't pushed back on. Dennis listened without interrupting. He took notes on a yellow legal pad, which was a habit from our courthouse days. When I finished, he set his pen down and exhaled through his nose. Your own daughter, he said. He stopped himself. Okay, here's where you stand legally. What they're planning covers at least 3 separate statutes. Conspiracy to commit fraud, that's PC 182. Administering a controlled substance to facilitate a felony, PC 347. And the psychiatrist if he takes money to sign a false evaluation. That's bribery of a medical professional under PC 675. He looked up. We're talking 3 to 4 years each, minimum. Consecutive if the DA wants to push. I know the statutes, I said. I need evidence. He nodded, went to a file cabinet and came back with 3 small devices. Each one was about the size of a USB drive. Voice-activated recorders. I use them in client meetings when I need backup documentation. These pick up everything within 15 feet. Crystal clear audio timestamp files downloadable. He set them on the desk between us, then he picked up his phone. I'm calling Gloria Reeves. Fraud Division, Pasadena PD. She worked with us on the Riverside guardianship cases 2 years ago. You've seen her testify. She's thorough, no shortcuts. He dialed and put it on speaker. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Reeves, Fraud Division. Gloria, it's Dennis Hartley. I have Gerald Sutton in my office. Yes, Judge Sutton. He's the victim of an active elder fraud conspiracy. I need you to hear this directly from him. Her tone shifted. Mr. Sutton, I'm listening. I laid it out again, more concisely this time. She asked good questions, the timeline, what specific words Craig had used, whether Sandra had shown any hesitation, what I knew about their financial situation. I told her about the debt collectors Craig had mentioned, $180,000 figure I'd overheard in a separate conversation a few weeks earlier. Here's how we proceed, she said finally. You go home tonight and you act like nothing happened. You plant the recorders, Dennis will show you where. Tomorrow morning, when they take you to this doctor, my team will follow. The moment cash changes hands, we move in. All 3 of them, your daughter, her husband, and the doctor, arrested simultaneously. You're sure you'll have enough for the warrants. The recordings plus the physical evidence from the tea plus the cash exchange at the scene. Yes. No defense attorney beats that combination. A pause. But Mr. Sutton, these are people who have already planned to drug you. Don't underestimate them. I spent 27 years watching people underestimate the person across from them in my courtroom, I said. I know how that ends. We finished the call. Dennis walked me through the recorders, one for the living room bookshelf, one for the kitchen, one I'd keep on me. He showed me the Bluetooth sync to my phone, then he shook my hand. Firm grip, the kind that means we're in this together. I sat in my car in his parking lot for a minute before I drove home. I want to be honest about something. On the drive back, I wasn't thinking like a judge. I was thinking like a father. I kept running back through the years. Sandra at 8 years old with a gap-toothed smile. Sandra calling me from college when her roommate's situation fell apart. Sandra at the altar with Craig and the look on her face that I'd told myself was happiness. I kept looking for the moment where things had turned, where I had missed something. I didn't find it. Maybe there wasn't one moment. Maybe it was a slow drift I hadn't been paying attention to. The house came into view at the end of the street. Same blue shutters, same neglected lawn. Inside, my daughter was waiting, probably watching the clock, wondering where I'd gone, running through her own version of the plan. I checked my face in the rearview mirror. Practiced the smile of a man who had a good day and good news to share. Then I got out of the car and walked to the front door. Sandra opened it before I reached the steps. Dad, we were getting worried. You didn't answer your phone. Where were you? Sorry, sweetheart. I went for a long drive after seeing the notary. I needed to clear my head, thinking about Russell the whole thing. I let her hug me and kept my arms relaxed. I'm fine. Just a heavy day. Craig appeared from the living room, hands in his pockets. Casual, but his eyes were doing the kind of quick scan I recognized from defendants who were trying not to look like they were scanning. You go see anyone while you were out? No, just drove around. I walked past them into the house. Easy, natural. I'm starving, actually. What's for dinner? At the table. With the food in front of us and the kind of careful small talk that happens when nobody's saying what they're actually thinking. I set down my fork and looked at both of them. I have some news, I said. Russell left me his entire estate. The beach house in Malibu and the condo in Santa Monica. I paused. The notary estimates it's worth around $3 million. I put the number up slightly. I needed them to feel urgency. Craig's fork stopped moving. Under the table, his hand found Sandra's. I caught the movement. Sandra's breath changed, just slightly. And then they both looked at me with expressions that were doing a lot of work to look like surprise and happiness. Dad, Sandra said. That's incredible. You two are my family, I said. This changes things for all of us. Maybe that Santa Monica place ends up being yours someday. Craig's pupils dilated just a little. Just enough. That's so generous, Gerald. Really, after everything you've done for us. After everything. Past tense. As if I were already gone, I smiled and asked for the salt. After dinner, I moved to the living room recliner with yesterday's newspaper. Old habit. It gave me something to look at without looking at them. Craig went to the window, pulled out his phone, turned slightly away from me, not all the way, just enough that he probably thought I couldn't hear him clearly. He kept his voice low, but the recorder behind the law dictionary on the bookshelf caught everything. Dr. Ramos, Craig Watson, tomorrow, 10 a.m., confirmed. My father-in-law, you'll evaluate him for competency, bring the standard forms, the full documentation package, $2,000 cash as we agreed. Don't worry about him. He won't suspect a thing. He put the phone back in his pocket, walked back to the couch, and sat down like he'd just ordered a pizza. I turned a page of the newspaper. Everything okay, just a business thing, he said. Nothing important. He smiled at me. Tomorrow's going to be a good day, Gerald. Sounds like it, I said. Around 9 p.m., footsteps on the stairs. A soft knock on my bedroom door. Dad, I brought you chamomile tea. Your favorite. Sandra's voice was careful, practiced. Drink it while it's hot, it'll help you sleep. I opened the door. She was holding the mug with both hands, steam rising off the surface. I looked at her face. She was trying to look like my daughter bringing her father tea before bed. She almost managed it. Almost, you're so thoughtful, I said. Thank you, sweetheart. I took the mug, said goodnight, and closed the door. I held it up to the bedside lamp. The tea had a slight cloudiness to it that chamomile alone doesn't produce. I'd seen enough evidence in guardianship cases to recognize what zolpidem does to liquid. It disperses, doesn't fully dissolve, leaves a faint haze. I'd kept a clean, empty water bottle in my closet for exactly this. I poured half the tea into it, sealed it tight, chain of custody, preserved. The rest went down the bathroom sink. I refilled the mug to the same level with tap water. The chamomile residue on the side still made it look untouched. Then I went back downstairs. I let myself sway at the bottom step, grabbed the wall. Huh. I said it quietly, like I was talking to myself. Sandra was off the couch before I finished the sound. Dad, here, let me help you. Craig was right behind her. They took me by the arms, one on each side, and walked me up the stairs. Their grip was firm, not rough, but firm. The grip of people with a plan, not people who were worried. I let myself fall onto the bed. Clothes still on, I closed my eyes and breathed slowly. Long, deep. The way you breathe when you're going under. Is he asleep, Craig? Low voice right outside the door. Give it a few more minutes. The dose takes about 30 minutes to fully kick in. He'll be out for at least 8 hours. Their footsteps went back down the hall. I counted to 300. Then I sat up, opened my phone, and connected to the downstairs recorder via Bluetooth. Earbuds and the audio came through clean. Craig's voice first. I can't believe he just drank it. Didn't even hesitate. Sandra. A short, nervous laugh. You said he wouldn't? Trusting old man. No warmth in it. Just fact. Okay. Tomorrow we wake him at 9. Get him dressed. Drive to Ramos's office. The evaluation takes maybe 20 minutes. We hand over the cash. We walk out with the documentation. My lawyer files for emergency guardianship the same afternoon. Judge rubber stamps it within 72 hours. And then we're done. We list the Malibu property immediately. Cash buyers, I already have 2 contacts. We clear $9 million, pay off the $180,000 we owe, and we're out clean. The Santa Monica condo generates rental income until we decide what to do with it. Silence, then Sandra, what if he tries to fight it after? Fight what? Once Ramos signs those papers, Gerald is legally incompetent. His word means nothing. He can't contest, can't sue, can't do anything without a court-appointed guardian, and we'll be the guardians. Another pause. He was useful when we needed somewhere to stay. Now he's useful in a different way, that's it. He's still my father. Sandra. Craig's voice dropped. Final. We're $180,000 in debt, and the collectors are not going to wait forever. This solves everything. Don't fall apart now. A long silence. Okay, she said. Okay, I know. I sat in the dark bedroom and listened to all of it, every word going directly to Gloria Reeves via the encrypted files I'd already queued up to send. I kept my breathing even. Kept my face neutral, which was easier than it should have been, and that told me something about how completely the judge part of my brain had taken over from the father part. When their voices finally dropped off and I heard the TV go on downstairs, I got up. I moved through the dark hallway, skipped the 3rd stair that creaked, went out the back door and across the wet lawn to my detached office at the rear of the property. I'd converted the old garage years ago, file cabinets along one wall, my old desk in the center, a window facing the driveway. Sandra had been in it once or twice as a child. Craig had never had a reason to know it existed. Dennis arrived 20 minutes after I texted him. He came through the back gate with his laptop and a legal pad. We sat across from each other at the old desk, the same way we'd sat across from each other in courtrooms for 15 years, except now we were on the same side of the table. I played him everything. Craig's phone call to Dr. Ramos, the conversation after the tea, all of it. Dennis's face didn't change much while he listened, but when Craig's voice said he was useful when we needed somewhere to stay. Now he's useful in a different way. Something moved behind his eyes. He opened his laptop. PC 122, conspiracy. PC 347, administering a controlled substance. PC 675, bribery of a medical professional. He looked up. Tad, Gerald. They're looking at 3 to 4 years each. Consecutive counts if the DA stacks them. Send everything to Gloria, I said. He was already typing. At midnight, Gloria Reeves arrived with 2 plainclothes officers. She examined the water bottle under the lamp, ran a field test. The reagent turned deep purple-blue within seconds. Zolpidem. She photographed it, sealed it in an evidence bag, and noted the time. That's PC 347, she said. Physical evidence, preserved chain of custody. She looked at me. Tomorrow you get in that car with them. You play it exactly like tonight. When the cash changes hands at Ramos's office, my team moves in. I'll be ready, I said. She gathered her team and left through the back. Dennis shook my hand at the gate. Get some sleep, he said. I watched his taillights disappear. Then I stood alone on the wet lawn for a moment, looking back at the house. The TV glow was still visible through the living room window. They were in there, satisfied, thinking the hard part was already done. I went back inside, climbed the stairs, and lay down on my bed fully dressed. I didn't sleep, but I was ready. Sandra knocked at 8:30. Dad, time to wake up. I scheduled that doctor's appointment, remember, for your blood pressure? 10 o'clock, I lay back against the pillow, messed up my hair with one hand, blinked slowly a few times. When she opened the door, I looked at her like a man trying to remember where he was. What time is it? 8:30. Come on, get dressed. I'll make you some breakfast. I don't remember saying I wanted a checkup. I rubbed my face. Let the pause sit there. Must be getting forgetful. A small, confused smile. If you set it up, okay, I trust you. Her shoulders dropped about half an inch relief. She bought it completely. Downstairs, Craig had coffee ready. He pulled out my chair for me with both hands, the kind of careful attention you'd show someone fragile. He talked about a restaurant he wanted to try after the appointment. Somewhere nice, a celebration for the inheritance. We're family, after all. I drank the coffee, the regular coffee, which I'd made myself while Sandra was in the shower, and nodded along and smiled at the right moments. We left the house just before 10. Craig insisted I sit in the back, more comfortable, he said. He drove. Sandra sat in the passenger seat and turned around twice to check on me, each time wearing that practiced look of daughterly concern. I watched the streets through the window. The drive was 35 minutes. The neighborhoods got progressively worse, tree-lined Pasadena giving way to strip malls, then to industrial blocks, then to the kind of streets where the buildings have bars on the windows and half the storefronts are empty. Not where you'd go for legitimate medical care. At a red light about 10 minutes out, I checked the side mirror. Gray sedan, 3 cars back, unmarked. Gloria's team. I felt my shoulders relax for the first time in about 18 hours. The building was run down 2 stories, a sign out front that said Ramos Medical in letters that had mostly weathered off. Narrow staircase up to the 2nd floor, no receptionist, waiting room with the kind of furniture that's been there since 1987 and hasn't been cleaned much since. No other patients. The whole setup was designed to process people quickly and quietly, which told me Dr. Eugene Ramos had done this before. He appeared from the back office almost immediately, a man in his mid-50s wearing a white coat over street clothes. His eyes went to Craig first, then to me, then back to Craig, and in that sequence was everything I needed to know about who was really in charge of this appointment. Mr. Sutton, please come in. Your daughter tells me you've been having some memory concerns, nothing to worry about, just a routine evaluation. I walked slowly, let Sandra guide me to the chair, sat down with the careful movements of a man who wasn't sure how his body was going to behave. The evaluation took 18 minutes. What's today's date? Who is the current president? Count backward from 100 by sevens. Simple arithmetic. I answered each question with a slight delay, sometimes glancing at Sandra, sometimes trailing off mid-sentence before catching myself. She squeezed my shoulder twice, playing the devoted daughter all the way to the end. Ramos set his clipboard down and turned to Sandra and Craig with a practiced expression of clinical concern. Mr. and Mrs. Watson, based on what I'm observing, the confusion, the memory gaps, the difficulty with sequential reasoning, I believe your father requires supervised care. My professional recommendation is that you pursue legal guardianship as soon as possible. I've prepared the full documentation package. He slid a folder across the desk. Pre-printed forms, competency evaluation. Recommendation for guardianship, medical justification, all of it ready to go before I'd walked in the door. Craig reached into his jacket. White envelope, he held it out across the desk. As we discussed, he said. Ramos reached for it. The door came open hard. Nobody move. Police. Gloria Reeves, badge up, 2 uniformed officers behind her. The envelope hit the floor. Bills scattered across the linoleum, fanned out, visible, impossible to explain away. Hands where I can see them. All of you. Ramos froze with his arms still extended. Craig spun toward the door and found a uniformed officer already there. Sandra grabbed the edge of the desk. Craig Watson, Gloria moved toward him, cuffs out. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder fraud, attempted administration of a controlled substance, and bribery of a medical professional. Turn around. This is a medical appointment. His voice had gone high. We're here for a checkup, tell them, Sandra. Dr. Ramos. The second officer stepped forward. You have the right to remain silent. Ramos put his hands up. I want a lawyer. I'm not saying one word without a lawyer. Sandra turned to me. Her face had collapsed. All the performance gone. Dad. Her voice broke on the word. Dad, what? How did you? I stood up. The confused old man gone. I heard you, Sandra. Yesterday afternoon, through the window, both of you, I kept my voice level. Even. The same voice I used from the bench when I wanted a defendant to understand that what was happening was serious and final. The nursing home, the sedative in the tea. The doctor you paid $2,000 to sign paperwork saying I wasn't competent to manage my own life. I heard every word and I recorded all of it. She shook her head. You don't understand the debt. We didn't know what else to. I understand exactly. I looked at her for a long moment. You decided I was worth more to you gone than present. That's what I understand. Gloria read them their rights. Craig tried a step toward the hallway. The officer by the door had him against the wall in about 2 seconds. I watched through the window as they put Sandra in the back of a patrol car in the parking lot below. She looked up at the window once. I don't know what she was looking for. I stepped back from the glass, 3 hours at the station giving my formal statement. Every detail in order, documented by a court reporter whose fingers never stopped moving. By the time I walked out, the afternoon light was already going gold over Pasadena. Dennis met me in the parking lot. Assets are frozen. Emergency protective orders filed. The will has been updated. Sandra's been removed. Everything's secure. Good, I said. We stood there for a moment. Neither of us had anything else to say that needed saying. The drive home took 40 minutes in traffic. I pulled into my own driveway and sat in the car for a while before I went inside. The house was quiet. Not peaceful quiet, just empty. There's a difference. I poured a glass of water, just water, nothing else in it, and stood at the kitchen window. Around 9 p.m. my phone rang. Number I didn't recognize. Florida area code. Is this Gerald Sutton? My dad was Russell Sutton, Alan Russell's son. His voice was careful, a little uncertain. The way you sound when you're calling someone you've never spoken to but feel like you should have. We talked for almost an hour about Russell mostly. The things he'd been like as a father. The things Alan wished he'd asked him while he still could. At some point, Alan said he'd heard through the estate attorney about what had happened with Sandra, and he was sorry and he didn't want to pry. It's all right, I said. I'm going to be in LA next month, he said. If you'd want to, I don't know. Get coffee or something. I'd like to meet you. Yeah, I said. I'd like that too. I hung up and set the phone on the counter. It wasn't okay. I want to be straight about that. None of it was okay. My daughter was in a holding cell. My son-in-law was facing felony charges. The family I thought I had turned out to be something I hadn't looked at closely enough. But I was still standing, still in my own house, with my name on my own property, with the note Russell had written still folded in my jacket pocket, for the brother who always did the right thing. It cost something doing the right thing. It always does. But I'd learned a long time ago, sitting up on that bench, watching people make the worst choices of their lives, that the cost of not doing it is always higher. I finished the water, turned off the kitchen light, went to bed. Tomorrow would come anyway. It always does. I'd spent 27 years watching people make the worst choices of their lives from up on that bench. And the one thing I learned is this. The people who betray you, they're always counting on you to love them more than you love yourself. Don't. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've been through something like this, you're not alone. Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.